Hey, Mia.
Hey, good evening, Beverly. Good evening, Yanela. I saw Yanela here. Where did she go? Good evening, Miss Chase. Yanela was just
Good
here.
evening, Mia. How are you?
I'm well and yourself, thank you.
Hi, Miss Chase. Oh, there she is.
Hi, how are you?
Fine, thank you.
So I'm going to turn my video off because every 7 o'clock I'm eating dinner.
Okay, no worries. That's up to
Okay,
you.
but I
No
want to say
problem.
I want to say hi.
Hi. Thank
Okay.
you.
Okay, thanks.
Hey, Bevy.
Hey, Yanela, how are you?
Good. Hi, Mia.
Hey, good evening.
Good evening.
Is Miss how do you pronounce her name, Mia? Miss Janice. How do you pronounce her last name?
Oh, Mrs. Granum.
Granum. Is she okay?
Yeah, I believe she just had a conflict.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you.
No problem.
I'm reaching out to the assembly member now to make sure he knows we on and to send him the link. So just a couple seconds.
Okie dokie.
Excuse me. Hey, Blackwell.
Hey, Beth. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
To, oh, touch base. So we're gonna see if we're gonna see what's going on.
Hey, Beverly, the assembly members in the waiting room, I'm gonna let them in.
Yes, thank you.
Sure thing.
Assembly member.
Hey, Beverly, how are you doing? I'm so sorry I'm on late. I just came back. My apologies to you and the group.
Oh, thank you so much. And thank you, even though you're coming back from the trip, thank you for
Yes,
still
coming back
taking the
from
time
West
out. We
Coast.
really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And sorry again, the plane just landed. It was a bit delayed. So I am en route back home, but happy to talk through housing
Sound-
with you guys.
Oh, that's great. Because we just wanted you to, the reason we're holding this is because we wanted you to talk to us about what the Kingsbrook Estates project looks like now, if you can. Assembly member?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, now we
Hello?
can.
Can you hear me now? I was saying
Yes.
at the end of the project is still in flux in many ways.
Okay.
But the project approved to move ahead in terms of what that looks like, in terms of all the details. The executive, the governor has not provided all the details to myself and Senator Myrie as yet. We're hoping to have shortly. I know that the elections have held up a lot of planning from that side. So I am waiting to get some more details, and I'm happy to report that back at the next forum when I have more information.
Okay. Are you able to answer some questions, not too detailed from the
Absolutely.
committee?
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you, Assembly member. So, guys, who wants to go first? Please raise your hand.
In 500 feet, stay straight to take the New Jersey 139 East Ramp.
So nobody has any questions? Yes, Jay.
Mr. Sword, you are muted.
Thank you very much. My name is Jay Sword, and I had a question regarding the Kingsborough project at 681 Clarkson Avenue. That's the project on the Kingsborough West. It's on the corner of Albany and Clarkson. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Hey Jay, this is referring to the Vital Brooklyn project. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah. There's a Vital Brooklyn project for the Kingsborough Estates. This is the one on Clarkson Avenue and Albany Avenue.
Yeah, I just sorry about that.
Sure.
I may have come a little unclear. We don't have the full details to present tonight. I'm still waiting on some details from the executive branch on that project. The project is with that being an affordable housing project in the district that's supposed to be a 100% affordable housing project.
Right. So what my question is there is I know there was an RFP. I've been looking at the issue, and there's a deed issue on the deed, and I know this is something very technical and something that I really can't ask you for, but there's an issue as to whether or not this project needs approval from the city council. So, and I'm not going to ask you for, of course, an answer to it because it's a very technical legal question that I'm not even sure I have the correct answer for. So the idea basically is that there's an in New York City, New York State owns the land now, and it goes back to New York City if it's no longer used for hospital purposes. So there's this certain issue with the deed. And when I read the statute that's applicable to this Vital Brooklyn, which is UDC, it's called UDC, the Urban Development Corporation Act. There's a certain section, section 14, that says if you have city property and if you have to get rid of it, if you have to extinguish an interest, you have to go through city council. So I'd like to know, or just to make the request, if there could be some assistance where, since this is a New York State project, where you could maybe reach out to maybe either the New York State Attorney General, who has to sign off on this, and give us back like get a legal opinion from the New York State Attorney General as to whether a certain section of the applicable act, which is Uniform Development Corporation Act, requires that this project, that to get rid of the property interest, which is called the reversionary interest in the deed, has to go through the city council. And that section also says that it's optional, that they could actually use any process that's normally used to dispose of real property, which is ULURP. So I'm not asking you for any sort of answer on something that's so esoteric and out there. The only thing I'm asking for is, since this is a New York State project, is it possible that since New York State Attorney General Letitia James has to sign off on this as per the RFP, that she could get, that there could be a legal opinion saying whether or not it has to go through the city council? And if there could be maybe a contact from your office or somebody who could be in contact maybe with this committee on that.
Yeah, I can definitely get back to you on that.
Sure.
And I'll reach out to the Attorney General's office tomorrow. I am dropping my email in the chat. If you can send a follow-up note for me tonight or tomorrow, I'll make sure that I get that back to you and the committee as soon as possible.
Okay, that's very kind. Thank you.
Miss Nelly? I think you're on mute.
Yanela.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Assembly Member. But as you know, our development borders the Vital Brooklyn Kingsbrook Jewish project, and the original plans that we saw and what we were told based on this state, it seems, well, rumor has it, we haven't seen the finished product, that it has somewhat changed. And that I understand when we met with Kingsbrook Jewish and also HCR, that they were going to ensure that the height requirement mirrors our development. And we weren't gonna have any towering shadow building. Across on East 49th Street, across from the Kingsbrook Jewish emergency site, there is a parking lot that the workers at Kingsbrook Jewish currently use. My understanding is that now that is going to be used, and a supermarket is going to be on the lower level. And in terms of that, with the mandate that was passed by the de Blasio regime, is that once you have like a food store or supermarket at the bottom, you could go up a certain additional stories. We have not seen the final project. I was one of the community advisory members. This committee have been trying to reach out to the person who spearheaded the community advisory meetings, and we've been unable to for a while. So we're kind of in limbo as to where it is right now, because we had a lot of community input. I also know that one of the key who used to spear or was in charge of the project is now working for our new mayor. So it seems as if the community or we are quarterly advisory meetings that we usually have is no longer, and we're having issues getting answers. So it would be, crucial for us to kind of, we're asking you for a lot. We know you're fairly new to the project, and but we're asking if at all, at some point, we could convene with the people at Kingsbrook Jewish or who had spearheaded it, and we could get some concrete answers, if that's something that is doable for you.
I'll do one better. I'll have the governor's folks come and do a briefing for the group as well. As you know, this project started under my predecessor and also the governor's predecessor, Governor Cuomo, back in 2020, I believe, and the pandemic slowed this down quite a bit. There has been some alterations to the project, which I haven't seen any of the final plans since March. There was some community recommendations sent back to the governor's team at the time. We had the late budget, and the session came to an end pretty quickly after in June. And since then, we have not had an opportunity to have a meeting with the second floor because they've been working a lot of external activities. Anticipated now that the cycle is behind us, that we'll have an opportunity to connect with them and get a more flushed out plan. And we'll present that plan in detail with the changes that were made since the last iteration and seeing when those community meetings can come back online so that we can continue to move ahead with the project.
Right. In addition to that, if I could piggyback, and I'm sure I'm hogging the mic, but I mean, we seem to be having a lot of development over on this side. On Schenectady and Rutland, 777 Rutland Road is a church right next to the old boys school, boys playground.
Yep.
The church has been or is in the process of being sold or has, and there's some sort of deed restrictions on it, but they did come to the community board. We found out, well, I'm living right here, and I found out by just going to a resource fair that Community Board 9 had, just to say that this was happening. We saw the flyer. Our chair, Beverly, and I were just going around looking at the vendors, and we got the flyer stating that they're going to build right next door. It's right across from the back of one of our buildings. And it turned out that they did go to CB9, the ULUP committee, and they are thinking of building a 12-story right on the corner. We're not averse to more housing, certainly not, but as far as the height and what's in the neighborhood, I think that, we're having a lot of density issues on this side of the district. Nobody seems to be listening. And with all the limited parking and, the infrastructure, the sewer, all of this, with all these housing development, new development coming in, we are faced with, a lot of issues. So I'm just wondering that to take that into consideration when we meet, the air quality, the density, the lack of parking that we have now, and all of that into, we are oversaturated on this side with supportive housing. And a big part of that facility that's coming, the 12-story, is going to be supportive housing. The need, but we are surrounded with all the other support. Kingsborough Psychiatric, we have other facilities close by. So, it would be good, as you said, once we get everything going, if we could really have a sit down and with the side. I'd
Sure.
appreciate it.
Yeah, and just to answer that in a very general way, rather, as many of you know on this call, the height and the zoning typically goes to the city council. Where we are trying to put our finger on the scale and do some leverage is with the upcoming 421A plan that is going to probably come back to the floor. It wasn't voted on last legislative session. We'll be on the floor probably in January, February for a vote. Is we're hoping that if state dollars are appropriated to a project, my desire is that we do a community land survey analysis and do a real urban plan to see what's in the area, to make sure we have the necessary resources to build a project so that the community can be okay when the project comes online. So making sure we have the right amount of schools, grocery stores, train stations, air quality, that is not overlapping with too many construction projects. That is language I'd like to see in a new plan if we are going to vote on one. But the height is definitely going to be on the city council. But I think where we can exercise some privilege here in the state is say we won't allocate money that doesn't have a real plan to study the area before a project takes off. There's not a lot of state land left, and not a lot of city land. So a lot of this is private development that we're seeing. If we're going to allocate money, we should definitely do a survey of the area before we dive in with additional resources to oversaturate communities.
Thank you.
Jay, is that your hand still up or is that you?
Jay's hand is still, the other, the other thing, Assembly Member, is that I'm not sure if you're aware, we have Walgreens on the corner of Utica and Midwood Street.
Yep.
The Rite Aid, now it's a Walgreens, now it's closed. Our seniors, a lot of, over 40% of the residents here at Harris Silva have been living here for over 40 years. So we do have a lot of seniors in the complex. One of the issues that we find is the difficulty now that all their meds are now forwarded down to Church Avenue, to that
Yep.
store. We're not sure what's coming on to this site as well, but you know, on the lookout, and if you should at least get any wind ahead of time, that you could at least, you know, it's just a heads up so that you can see what is best for this side of the development and for our community, something that will enhance what we do here now. You know, it's just a lot that's happening all around us, and we're tending to get a little inundated with
Yeah.
all the
There's a bill in the health committee right now, and the health committee's chair, Dick Godfrey, who was in the assembly 52 years, just left. But there is a bill in the committee right now that is essentially what is happening is a lot of pharmacies, mom and pop pharmacies, are closing down in New York. A lot of big box chains went up, and now the big box chains are now disappearing from doing pharmaceutical work because what they're doing is they're having these specialty pharmacies that deliver products directly to people's homes, opposed to having pharmacy care. There's a bill to study the impact that's having on seniors, particularly in what we call NORs, naturally reoccurring aging communities, such as Flatbush, Bed-Stuy, and other areas, to see if there is tax subsidies that can be provided to bring back some local mom and pop pharmaceutical stores, because a lot of the drugs are now arriving via specialty pharmacies, which are delivering directly to your home, or there's specialty pharmacies that are working with companies like Uber and Lyft to deliver groceries, or not groceries, pharmaceuticals in the same way they would deliver food. So we are looking at some bills to see if we can re-incentivize having pharmacies back in communities, and the impact that's having on senior citizens don't always have access to technology in that way.
Do you have a part 2 to that question, you know? Or are you good?
No, I
You good?
appreciate that you're taking. Thank you.
Okay. So I have a question, Assembly Member. Some of the changes that you mentioned has been made to the project, and you said you weren't familiar. Did you have any input before the final changes were made?
No, because the legislation for that, for Vital Brooklyn specifically, was passed prior to me coming into the legislative body. So that was already signed by the prior governor and the prior,
What's final?
I believe that was in 2020. So in terms of input, there are tweaks we can make to the final project, but those tweaks have not been presented in the document. What they gave me was a broad overview, but there was some community input they were still putting into that project. I have not seen a final project since sometime in early April, very, very late March.
Okay. My next question is, I remember you were elected, you went to Albany your first time when they were finalizing the budget too. Did you get
Yes.
an opportunity to make some changes? If you did, what were they? Did any of them involve development?
No, so the changes in the budget, while the budget was late this year, I got to Albany, I got elected on the 22nd of March, I swore on the 30th. The budget was due the 31st. The budget didn't pass until April 7th. The only tweaks that were made to that particular budget by the time I got into the legislature was tweaks to discovery laws on bail reform. But there weren't, that was a significant holdup, was actually bail reform. It had nothing to do with any other package in the bills. I think we passed that budget Saturday morning in that April, that first Saturday morning, because the caucus weekend had just commenced when we had signed off at 8:32 in the morning on that budget. But it was mostly delayed because of some of the tweaks that were being requested by the executive for bail reform.
Okay. All right.
I think this session is going to have a more specific housing focus. I think there are bills that could cause eviction. There's bills like TOPA. There's bills like no winter eviction. There are a couple of bills that are on the docket this session, as well as the House chair, Assembly Member Simbowitz, who was a chair of that committee for over 10 years. He will no longer be in the legislature, so there'll be a new housing chair as well in the state legislature. There's a lot of shakeups. There's been about a loss of 7 to 10 members potentially in the assembly. Democrats specifically. So that's going to change the composition of the legislature quite a bit. I think we've lost about 250 years of collective knowledge. And we're back in Albany early December to begin to plan out our legislative agenda as Democrats moving forward in January.
And given that we are the housing committee, what do you think? I want to phrase this so that we can get the answer we're looking for. What do you think? What are some of the things in regards to housing that you think we would want to know at this point that you want to sponsor or spearhead or want to see happen? I know good cause eviction is something, but that's one of the legislations that, or it's been up there for a minute. What are some of the things that you want to see happen, that you want to be instrumental in?
I mean, so one of the things that I want to put my finger on this session is the 421A package is going to come back out, because there is going to be some conversation around that, I think, because we didn't pass it last session. I think there's a desire for folks to get that going. I'd like to see in that package a baseline of senior housing. So when I look at the formula right now, the formula currently is 80-20, 80% market, 20% affordable. I'd like to see that those numbers shift drastically. I'd like to see 20% baseline for senior housing, 30% affordable housing, and leave it at 50% market rate, opposed to the current formula. So that's something that's really I would like to see happen this session. Again, I think depending on who the chair is for the Committee of Housing, depends on how the agenda of the Housing Committee will operate. But I can't imagine us not having 421A on the docket at all this session. I think it's going to come up pretty early, probably no later than the budget.
Is there any plan to have any level of oversight on 421A?
Community oversight or legislative oversight?
You know what? Honestly, Assembly Member, as long as there's oversight to manage, because right now, the way 421A is, it seems like developers can get the benefit, but the residents do not. So it seems like somewhere in there needs to be either the developer is audited or have to show some level of paperwork on who has rented the apartment that meets the requirements. And when the tenants move in, like with rent stabilization, now on our leases, it's on the back, it tells you what your right, some of the basic rights. When they move into, a lot of tenants, when they move into a 421A building, they don't know that. So just some level of structure, not just the developer getting the benefit, but the tenants need to understand that there is a benefit. Is there some way that you can put in the legislation where
think
the
the ten-
tenant would know that?
I think in the 2019 legislative package that the housing laws that were passed in 2019, which were some of the strongest housing laws in
Right.
the country, I believe there is a tenant's bill of rights that is provided to a tenant at the time of signing a lease. One of the things
And that's for
that
421A as well? Sorry to interrupt. That's for
you know
421A as
that
well?
yeah, that's for everything. It's any housing
Okay, my
complex. I
mistake.
think the issue we've had over the years with both the city, state, and federal government is not the lack of legislation or good legislation. I think it's been a lack of enforcement. And I think,
I
that's where we
agree.
have to look at codes through the codes committee and really make sure that we're enforcing the laws in the books. I think we keep adding laws to the books that I think are strengthening either criminal justice, housing, access to healthcare. It's just not being enforced in real time. And if people don't know their rights, then essentially if their rights are violated, they won't know to call it foul. So I think we as the assembly and elected officials in general representing Central Brooklyn and throughout the state can do a better job of communicating as laws are passed what that means for the everyday resident so they know their own rights.
Okay, that's a good point. All right, so you're saying that doesn't come from you or you guys, your group. It's
It's something that we can push out. I mean, we have a newsletter. We push out about 3 newsletters annually. I think I did 2 last session. I just got in when we put out 2. But I do plan on doing a quarterly newsletter to kind of give updates on what's happening up in Albany, particularly in those first 6 months when we're not here regularly to communicate. Make sure that those things are communicated. I will have a legislative corner in there. And any new legislation that comes up or changes, it'll be in that corner as well as community events and opportunities to ask questions.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that.
Absolutely.
Does anybody else, Jay and then Nelly, Unella, Jay?
Yes, Assemblyman, I wanted to just make 2 points. I just want to make sure. Can you hear me clearly, sir?
I can hear you very loud.
Okay, great. So 2 points, just that a lot of the money that fuels a lot of the affordable housing comes from, I believe, New York State Homes and Community Renewal, a state sort of agency or department. I just wanted to make the request or to throw out an idea. My concern is the lack of affordable housing for families in terms of 3-bedroom apartments. The New York City zoning code incentivizes studios, 1 bedrooms, and 2 bedrooms. Only studios, 1 bedrooms, and 2 bedrooms is in the New York City zoning code. The mayor, Eric Adams, mentioned that he wants to go more towards creating affordable housing for studios and 1 bedrooms. And New York City was made great. Many of its different neighborhoods, religious, racial, etc., are made up of families. So I want to just throw out the idea, perhaps there's a way where New York State could say, if we're giving all of this money, these state-funded projects, we're going to require that there be that this project, when they do their RFP, the request for proposal, that if 22% of the households, according to the U.S. Census in New York, 22% of the households in New York City are 4 persons or more. So if we know that, let's say, you got a 22% figure, there should at least be like a certain amount of units that go for 3-bedroom to represent everybody, rather than just singles and 1-bedroom apartments, etc. So it's asking New York State Homes and Community Renewal to, in their RFPs, to have a certain amount for 3-bedroom or more units, because New York City isn't doing it, and they're going in the opposite direction. That's just point number 1. And then point number 2 that I want to throw out there is this process in which the general project plan, in which New York State has land. There's a huge amount of land in our district from Albany and Clarkson going all the way out to Utica and Clarkson. And the problem is that New York State comes in and they say, well, there's no ULURP. There's no right for the community boards to get involved. and everyone thinks that it's, where does this come from? They think it's just New York State, and that's how it is. The authority from it comes in the UDC Act, in which there's a certain provision in the Uniform Development Corporation Act, the state act, that the state says, okay, it's a blighted neighborhood, so we are going to, in the UDC Act, it basically supersedes New York City law. So there's a project going on in Penn Station, and one of the I'm not sure, one of the New York State either assemblymen or Senate is trying to create legislation providing for ULURP, even though it's a state project. This is in Penn State. There's a project going on in Penn Station, and it's someplace in the House or someplace where it's going through it, and it may take a year and a half. So my request would be is that if you have these taxpayer-funded projects like 681 Clarkson Avenue, Vital Brooklyn West is a $400 million taxpayer-funded project. The community who's funding it has no voice, no say, no objection powers. So I would ask that maybe there could be a change in the law to the UDC Act, either just even specific to where from Utica and Clarkson over to Albany, so that it doesn't happen that the community has no voice, because there's a tremendous amount of land and they could do the same thing. And there's issues of parking, and there's issues of oversaturation of social services, where basically certain neighborhoods are a dumping ground for the homeless and social services. And I'll say that 2 of the 3 projects have almost 50% of the revenue that goes to these are going to homeless or social services. If you look at the units, like that's where the money's going. So when it comes to affordable housing, it's not really going when you talk about Community Board 9, it's not going for families and equitably for everybody. It's basically going, there's a disproportional amount, almost around 40 to 50% that's going for homeless and social services. And I'll say bluntly that, basically they're dumping the city's problems in Black neighborhoods in violation of the fair share law. But the problem is the fair share law applies to mostly government entities. So what they did is now they're giving it to the private entities, and they said, well, it's private, so there's not an issue. So the oversaturation. So I asked just that the 3-bedroom, if you could look at the idea of that there should be housing for families, and then the second point is that the community should have a voice, and this general project plan, people should be amended so that there's ULURP that's contained in it. And also, I do understand that you were elected after the general plan for Utica Crescent, which is there. So I understand that you came in after all this stuff already was finalized.
Yeah, no, so thank you for all of that. Raul, I see you on the line. I hope you got some of that down, because I couldn't write it while I was in motion here. But absolutely, I do think there is a strong need for more 3 bedrooms in the affordable housing. Again, 421A expiring last session gives us an opportunity to go back in and take a look at it. And certainly, I think as you talk about Albany and Clarkson to Utica, there are opportunity spaces that we can definitely involve more community voices in projects. And I'll make sure that I look at the law specifically and see if there's any tweaks we can make to that specific provision of the law in the upcoming session. Thank you for that, Jay.
Unella, you have a question?
Assembly member, this House committee, some members have been working with our neighboring 17 and 14.
Yep.
Just to see how, we are all in the same boat. We're experiencing, similar issues as far as the housing and development concerned. Would it at some point later on down, when you do find time in your busy schedule, if we could, because we've mentioned the 3 boards, 9, the housing committee for 9, 17, and 14, if at some point we could get together and come up with a comprehensive plan that would be covering or all of us in some
You,
way. Or the-
you read my mind already. We've already begun to convene certain task force out of our office. The
Mhm.
first two of which met, and housing is on the docket to be a task force as well. So we've had a transportation task force meeting. We've had an education task force meeting, which includes members of the different community boards that I represent.
Mhm.
A housing committee will be set up soon. And once that is set up, I'll get that to all of our community board chairs. They'll get that to the appropriate chairs and the appropriate folks, but it'll also be listed in our newsletter. And those are mostly our task force meetings, usually quarterly meetings that we meet to try to get legislative and policy ideas together. I'm imagining that the housing one will not meet until January. And part of the delay with the housing one is that I have requested from the speaker to change one of my committees to housing this session, which will give me better insight into the hearings, oversight, and some of the legislatives that are coming up that oftentimes don't even come to the floor for a vote. A lot of things, as you guys know, from being in a committee board, get hashed out in committee and not necessarily in a general meeting. So I'm hoping that that gives us an opportunity to dig deeper into the weeds, particularly as we know that housing is probably one of the biggest challenges that we face in the 43rd Assembly District, the shortage of it, the lack of it, and the way it's sometimes structured in terms of what housing we get in our community. So I will get that information to you guys as soon as possible. We have a Democratic retreat December 7th to the 9th in Albany. We'll be assigned our session schedules as well as our committee assignments. Hoping by then I can report back that I'm on that committee. I had started with doing a task force around the committees I was already assigned to. But this is one that we did request from the speaker, and hopefully are granted it.
Oh, that'd be great. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Are there any other questions in the room? Because yes, Raul, but you're on the team. What's going on?
I wanted to, so I live in CB8, and Brian will call me the CB8 guy. But there was do people here know about M-Crown?
I'm not familiar.
So M-Crown was an effort by CB8 to deal with, proactively deal with the pressures along Atlantic Avenue, which had a lot of industrial zoning along there. So I would be interested to see if CB9 could maybe learn from that experience. And sometimes, it maybe is easier said than done. It's nice to be proactive as a community board, but there's limits to how successful that can be. And it'd be interesting to learn, I think, for CB9, what that experience was, especially, in all these areas that we're talking about. So
Elaborate just a little on M-Crown, please.
So M-Crown, usually Atlantic Avenue has a lot of, every developer comes in and says, oh, I want a zoning override. Oh, I want a zoning override. And so, and a lot of times they get them. So this was, CB8 said, okay, let's get ahead of the game and see what we want for this area, get some principles on paper, so that we can judge these things beforehand. And, and some people were actually, I know some people were a little critical because they said, oh, you're giving too much to the developers. And other people said, we got to deal with it somehow. So, I mean, I think we have a lot of areas in CB9 that are also zoned for industrial use. And we got to figure out how to deal with that. So, just in general, it's nice for community boards to sometimes learn from each other. So, hopefully we can do that if we have a housing committee.
Raul, so was the McDonald's on Atlantic Avenue and the car wash across the street from it, was it part of that?
The car wash across the street is CB2, so that would not be.
Okay.
But yeah, there was lots of debate over that McDonald's. So
and I noticed it hasn't been developed yet.
No, I think it's coming. I think the McDonald's did get a the demolition permit has been filed, as far as I
Oh, okay.
understand.
All right.
I'll see if I can get the mCrown link and put it in.
Yeah.
I've been very active in the chat. Sorry if I'm overdoing it, but I'll
Send us a
try to
link,
look it up.
Well, that's okay, because we need to know, because right now, first of all, for housing in CB9, there has to be, we need something to establish a partnership between ourselves and the decision makers. And right now, when it comes to development, CB9 is kind of behind the 8 ball. We don't really win in those kind of situations, and we're not really we want to change that, but we're not really sure why that is, because we have so many developments to come up. The botanical garden one was put by the wayside, but I think it's going to come up again with this whole policy of the city that says yes. I think 960 Franklin is going to come up again, but either way, send that link to me, and then we can share it with the housing committee. So maybe we can swing at that ball one more time to see if we can hit something.
Great. Yeah, I'll send it. I was just trying to do a quick search and it didn't come up immediately. I'll email you then.
Okay, thank you. I'd appreciate it. So we have a lot of people in the room. Does anyone else have any questions or concerns about that they want to ask the assembly member, who, once again, I want to express how nice and thankful we are that he decided to jump on the line as he was coming from the airport. Thank you very much. So, so does anybody else have any questions or concerns? If not, we're going to go ahead and let the assembly member go ahead and relax after his trip. Does anyone else have any questions or concerns? Because that's a big project over there, and we have parking as a concern. We have social services as a concern. Grocery stores, Yanela mentioned earlier. Hi, yes, Nicole.
Good evening, everyone. My question is in regards to developments, how often is there some kind of communication between whether it's a community board or the developers and MTA, for example, to potentially increase service depending on how many units are being brought into the neighborhood? Thank you.
Can you answer that, assembly member?
I think so. I heard part of the question. Sorry about that. The question was how impactful is the MTA bringing services online based on the amount of residents that are moving in? Is that what was your question? I'm sorry.
Yes, to that effect. Essentially, do developers and MTA, or is there some kind of requirement for after a certain amount of residents are moving into the neighborhood?
So the short answer is no. We haven't. The city, the state has not done a really good job, which is why I said that part of what I want to do is include language in a bill that if we're using state dollars to build property, we should do a real assessment, urban planning, find out how many parks, how many schools, how much grocery stores, how much trains, how much was the ridership. We should really do a real analysis before we start construction. And I think that would also begin to slow down some of the projects that we're not doing 2 or 3 projects at the same time. So we're really measuring the impact that project is going to have on water, lighting, energy, all those things. So the answer is no, and we should be doing it. And it's something that I hope to have in the new legislation for any subsidies the state will be giving out to help build housing.
Assembly member, transit falls under you, right?
I am on the transportation committee. However, transportation itself falls under corporations and authorities as an oversight committee. But the state regulates transportation. I sit on transportation committee, but that's different from the metropolitan MTA, because MTA is actually considered authority and not transportation.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Any other questions in the room? I see a lot going on in the chat, but I see Nicholas.
Good evening,
Nicholas.
everyone. Yes, I'm about to ask my question.
Go ahead.
My question has to do, when you get a development building next to your house, how much protection does the law, the state, city and state protect the next door neighbor? Because I've been witnessing a lot of abuse of developers of the next door neighbor to their construction. in one situation where I have a construction, a developer in my house took my neighbor's water, electricity, and did not even compensate for them because a lot of the people aren't aware what their rights are. Unless you could get yourself a lawyer that's certified in the area, they are going rampant. Because the common situation it is they will take a single family house and then suddenly they put about 5 or 6, 7-story building in there. And then
So, hold on, Nicholas, for a second. It sounds like you're muffled or talking through water. Is there a way to clear that up?
yes, I'm gonna try to do that very quickly. So let me.
But if I understood your question,
Mhm.
there's a developer in your community and it appears as if they're negatively affecting your home. Did I get that?
Correct.
And what is the question you have of the assembly member?
What's the protection do the homeowners have when such construction is coming up next to their home?
What protection does homeowners have when
Correct.
construction is going up next to their home? Okay.
I get,
Okay.
I guess, again, the short answer is 3 and 1. Obviously, like, again, I think going back to the first point, there are a lot of laws on the books that protect people from development of scriptless projects. There have been a number of projects where people's homes have been destroyed as a result. The quick answer is to call 3 and 1 and file a complaint through the Department of Buildings. Second answer is call our office with the 3 and 1 number and have us chase it down with the Department of Buildings. But there are protections in place. Construction cannot start before a certain time. Property cannot be damaged. A resource from another home cannot be used. But again, if no one reports it, then there's no way to hold that person liable. There have been construction projects we've had stop orders on by folks reaching out to us directly, but we have to know where it's happening and when it's happening.
Okay. You heard that, right, Nicholas?
Yes, I did. But
Okay.
if most people are not savvy enough, because and sometimes they prey on especially the elderly that's there, because
Right.
I've seen situations where they try to go over your property line, unless you're savvy enough to know and get yourself a lawyer. But what I'm saying, is there any way we could really work and get the population, I mean, the members, the community, informed? Because usually people approach me, I tell them call 311, but sometimes 311 takes a lot over, and hopefully you get a stop order. But
we can certainly put together, I think, from the office, homeowners and renters bill of rights document that we can distribute. But again, it's the challenge will be, one, distributing among people in general. Like we can bring it to community board meetings. Not everyone attends a community board meeting. We can go door to door. Not everyone answers their doors. We can create the document. I think we can definitely put it on our social channels and have it shared. But I think the short is we'll create the doc. We'll make sure it's available and accessible. But the reality is incumbent on all of us to share that information with everyone we can, particularly those we know may be unfairly targeted, because it's very hard to apply to an assembly district of 151,000 people to make sure everyone has the same information outside of providing information.
May I also suggest, sorry, Assembly Member, may I also suggest to everyone who's in the room, we can be partners. It doesn't just have to fall on the Assembly Member and other elected officials to disseminate this information, because we all have different distribution lists. All of us do. Not only that, we confront our neighbors, we see our neighbors physically. Hello, good morning, how you doing, on the elevator, walking down the street, whatever. So when they create the information, they meaning the elected officials, and they disseminate it to us, then we should share it with our neighbors. Because one thing that Nicholas is talking about, once the foundation of your home is destroyed, once any part of your home is destroyed, now you're going through a great deal of personal expense to reestablish your home back to what it was before, when it is not your fault. You have done everything that you could do to maintain the quality of your home, when really it's a third party who is a developer that came in and wreak havoc on your asset. So may I suggest that we see, in this aspect, we see Assembly Member and others like him as partners, because they're going to have access to information that we don't have access to. And 311, even though a lot of people don't feel that way, 311 is a good place to start a battle, to make the elected official, not the elected official, the developer know that you are paying attention. Now, sometimes that avenue is hard to navigate, regardless of whether it's hot heat and hot water or the foundation of your home. It's hard to navigate, but partnerships make it easier. And that's for everyone, Nicholas, your neighbors who are struggling with that. And would you agree with that, Assembly Member?
So I got cut off partially, but I heard the last part of the sentiment, which is just I believe what you were communicating was that teamwork and this work is important and vital for us to all be sharing information as we get it. Which is, again, being away from the district from January to June for the legislative session. There's no better weapon I have than my staff, Raul and others on my team, to really lead that information charge and create that information for the district and what's happening in Albany. But also people like yourself on this call who are community engaged, involved in community boards, who care about our communities, who sometimes also have more knowledge set than even the elected officials. I often describe my role to people as a generalist, in terms of, if you look at a doctor, you have a general practitioner who does all areas of medicine. That's the job of the assembly. But then there are people like yourselves who are specialists, ophthalmologists, podiatrists, who can really cut into the weeds of issues because you spend a lot of your time either working in that space or caring deeper about that space. And a lot of your work informs the work I do in Albany. So I look forward to all that participation from you guys as well. Ideas that we can champion, legislation comes from the community. I am literally just your voice in a chair in Albany, but it's your ideas, your values, your collective desires that I go into Albany to try to champion.
Wonderful.
Yes, thank you. That's great. Everybody heard that, right? And we're all buying in because we're all sitting here listening. We're all buying in, right?
Yep.
So thank you. So does anybody else have any question? Nicholas, you have part two to a question, or you just forgot to put your hand down? Okay, Nicholas, I'm assuming you forgot to put your hand down.
He's talking, but you gotta unmute yourself, Nicholas. You're muted.
Mute myself. I will know. I see the other. But we have some developers in the neighborhood that are really doing bad practices. Besides 311 and calling the elected official office, what other action can we do? So, did you hear me?
Are you asking me or the assembly member?
I'm asking the assemblyman, anybody else.
Okay, sir.
Because what it is that I don't know.
I'm sorry, Nicholas, you read that question again one more time. My apologies.
So I said, beside following 311 and the office of the elected official, what is there anything else that we can do to do that? Or the question really,
I think that's the extent. I mean, again, we're living in some interesting times where I don't want people confronting people outside. I know that sometimes there could be exchanges and words exchanged with some developers or the workers rather and people, but I just don't want people to put themselves in that position. I don't think 911 is the best route for a phone call because it's often an agency that has to respond. And I don't think there's as many DOB inspectors going out to inspect projects during the day. Again, some of the things we're looking at, even with penal law and criminal justice reform work that we've done, is looking at, do we have the manpower and the capacity to enforce what we intend the law to do? And the answer is oftentimes no. I think that's something, again, this session, outside of an election year, again, we just had an election year, a lot of folks were very on their toes about certain things. I think we can go back into this session to be a little bolder on the enforcement part, particularly codes enforcement, and making sure that we have the bandwidth of resources to actually implement what the law intends to implement, which is keep people safe in their homes. So I don't have a clear answer on that outside of 311 is your best method because, again, that triggers the Department of Buildings to know there's some kind of violation. If you call our office, Raul, myself, and the team have numbers for commissioners and intergovernmental folks who we can follow up and chase it down. There are very few people commissioners who want a call from an angry elected official about a project in their district. So that is typically the best way to go about it.
Thank you.
I just want to jump in. I had a call today and this is not the first time, of somebody who was, their house was getting damaged by construction next door. And so I contacted DOB, and they said they wanted the 311 complaint. And the person who called me up had not, the building said that they had not gotten a 311 complaint, and the person thought that they'd done a 311 complaint. So they, I guess, had done it wrong, or did it in a way that, I mean, wrong in the sense that that DOB didn't recognize their complaint. So we need some dialogue, but also, yeah, we need people to be more informed about how to do it properly. And but yeah, call us up, because I've been learning in my couple months here, like, who actually responds and who can be who will be responsive, not only in buildings but in other departments as well.
Thanks, Raul.
And
Any other
the
questions?
last what I'll say about what Raul just said is also the reason why we say 311 is not just because we want to push people away from asking us direct questions, but it is a data tracking system as well. So when we do hearings, what I will do is sometimes I'll pull 311 data if I'm going before a certain committee and ask them specific questions about specific numbers and specific complaints. If we see a trend in something, obviously that's an indication that something's wrong with the law or something's wrong with enforcement. So again, 311 is not, and there's an app for 311 now as well. So you don't have to call anymore. You can actually download the app 311 on your phone and make a complaint about buildings, rats, anything. And that data, we can say, I want all the data of all the 311 complaints for all the rats in my district. And they'll give me that information based on the calls or the inputs you put into the app. So it's just a really helpful tool in terms of advocating for you with real numbers and not just anecdotal stories.
Sorry to just jump in, but
Any
I
other?
was gonna say to you, Nicholas, the same thing. The 311 calls, when you give the number, the assembly member is telling you to provide that number to the office so we can track it and try and push it forward. And the more of you neighborhood that complain about the same thing, the more power you're putting behind and pushing forward.
So Blackwell, with the feedback, you're saying that 311, you're saying exactly what the assembly member said, right?
Everything is done, yes, everything is done by a paper trail. You ain't
Okay.
getting nowhere without one. And the more people that's complaining about the same thing, and like you said, when you get these 311 calls, everybody that call the assembly member's office and give them the 311 complaint number so that we can track it.
Okay. Everyone in the room understand even, it's a little feedback, but everyone understands what Blackwell said, right? That 311 is the 311 is a tracker, just like the assembly member said. So regardless of what you're calling about, all of that's being documented. Many of us just focus. One thing to bear in mind too, is that at the end of your 311 call, they're gonna give you a number. It depends on what you call for, but we usually call for heat and hot water. So ours begin with a C, HPD, things like that. They usually give you a number, and they usually ask you, do you want it sent to you via email or do you want to write it down? And I usually get mine sent to me in an email or a text, and that way I can use it for reference and forward it to someone else. If you're more comfortable getting it written, then write it while the lady repeats it to you, and ask her to repeat it as many times as you need to, because somebody else, when you start to elevate that complaint, someone else is going to ask for it, and that's their point of reference.
Right, and would you say, and I am in total agreement because I'm a 311 lady. The issue, the issue assembly.
The queen?
Yes, assembly member, is that is there anyone in your office that is reviewing in your district the 311s and what it's about? at this time? Because I know, things are still.
No, that's an excellent question. So Raul is my director of constituent services. We are in the process right now of making some additional hires for the team. We, as you mentioned earlier, we kind of dove in on March 22nd and just kind of hit the ground running with a team that was helpful to help us get to this point in terms of being a functional operating office. Over the last couple of weeks, we've been doing a lot of internal evaluation of the team, things we need to kind of run our program. And we've identified in the short that we'll be hiring a legislative director to handle a lot of the legislative arm of the office. Raul will be responsible for the constituent services piece. Those pieces will talk because what often happens again is as we track data, we've changed our intake process in the office. There is a whole intake process now in terms of how people come in. We have a data system that we use to track how many cases we're closing per week. Raul, what's the number right now? We're at 76% close rate or somewhere around there?
I only know that the cases in front of me, and we've done hundreds of cases. Yeah, Debbie's been keeping track of the numbers. I'm just trying to.
Yeah, my deputy chief of staff has the numbers in terms of close rate, and we'll make sure that information is also public moving forward in January as we bring on our communication director. I think, folks, I would say the first thing for a lot of folks in this call is the text D43 to 66866. That's the D43 to the phone number 66866. And there you'll find a lot of our communication in terms of constituent corners, success stories. We've had some major success stories. But oftentimes when someone does come in the office, the first question we ask on the intake form is their information, one, but also we do ask a supplemental question, have they called 311? And if they have, we include that with their case file. If they have not, then sometimes we will file a case depending on the circumstance that they're called in the office for, or we'll just do their case. We do have a pretty good data system now in terms of understanding the kinds of complaints we have coming to our office. And again, you guys notice anecdotally, but over more than half our cases are housing cases. So and very complicated ones at times that Raul and I can spend hours scratching our heads at. But data is only good when you get good data. If you don't get good data, you get bad outcomes. So we encourage everyone to just continue to use some of the city's tools because it's not just helpful to me, but it's helpful to the city and to other elected officials who represent the area to kind of understand what's going on. There's no system that talks between offices. So you come to my office, it doesn't necessarily get shared with your council member, but if you call 301, we can all access that data.
Right, and I appreciate that, Assembly Member, because, my gripe, we get no love at this end of the district. So
I know that's gonna change soon. That's gonna change very soon.
I do try to be a good citizen, and I do try to keep the elected officials, or precinct, whoever involved, and with what's going on at this end of the district, because what affects one affects all of us. So we don't have our main gripe on this end of the district, as Ms. Blackwell will attest to, is the noise complaint, and the lack of resources as far as the precinct. Sometimes they are short officers coming to this end of the district.
Yep.
So I do reach out to the 71st for the most part desk, and air whatever issues I have, but I also do 311
and just so you know, Raul and I do plan on once you let us know the date, we'll be there for a constituent day, and kind of go through cases of people in that east side of the district, but also just listen to some of the general complaints in the area. You're right, the east side, the north side is getting a lot more love. The south side gets a lot of love. I do need to get out to the east side a lot more.
A lot of love. Now I think it's our turn, and I know. Yeah. So thank you.
No worries.
Okay.
So everyone, we're going to begin to wind down. If there aren't any more, first of all, can we hear from Jay? I see your hand, but let's give some others an opportunity who haven't spoken yet or asked a question. So if there's no one in the room, Is there anyone in the room who haven't yet had their voice heard, would like to speak now? Yes, Teresa.
Oh, I posted in the chat, but I wanted to hear the text information. I didn't quite
Oh,
get.
sure. No worries. Thanks, Teresa.
If you-
The phone number you're gonna text is 66866. That's the phone number, 66866.
Right.
And when you go into the body of the message, all you're gonna write is D as in dog 43. And you'll send that, and now they'll get a response back saying, "Hi, this is me. Please send me your email address." You send me an email address, we're gonna add you to our list. And then moving forward, you'll get all of our emails, and we can segment the list based on issue areas as well. But we do send quite a bit of emails. I think we have about a 40% open rate right now for our emails, and we send about 3 emails a week. We're trying to trim it down, but sometimes so much good information comes and we want to get it out right away, and it's the fastest way for us to communicate with the community.
Oh yeah, I emailed you guys about the turkey giveaway for my neighbor. Never heard
Yes.
back. Thank
You
you.
haven't heard back yet?
No.
I will make sure that Naomi gets on that immediately.
Okay. I'm trying to help out. They were at when that was happening.
And I'm sending you that general email address.
Any other questions?
Thank
Thanks.
you very much.
Any other questions from voices that have yet to be heard? So once again, I want to thank the Assembly member for coming. Yes, Jay. You have a question or a statement? So I want to thank.
You would need to unmute yourself for somebody to hear.
Thank you. Yes, I have one final statement, just to make, which is just a concept. The Vital Brooklyn projects, they are keeping the community in the dark. So what happens is they come to the community board, and they come a month before the date of the general project plan meeting. So they're waiting almost a year. There's a press release, the winning bid comes, they wait like a year, they don't tell people what's in that proposal. They come to the community board, which they did here in like March. I'm talking about Clarkson Estates. They come here in March, they tell it to the community. One person actually at the ULURP committee said, my community was never notified of this. And then the next month in April, there's the general project plan meeting. So there's not enough time for the community board to do anything, because if they come in March and then they're going to have the project plan meeting 30 days later, you're not going to be able to do anything. So my point is that they're purposely waiting. They're not disclosing the details of the proposal of the winning proposal to the community, and they're waiting, and they're coming here at the last moment, and they're not giving the community enough time to see it, digest it. That's what happens in Clarkson Estates. And prior to them coming, like when they came in March for the to give the presentation, they said, we just completed our environmental, and there's no community, there's no environmental impact. So that means that for like 6 months they were doing all the environmentals, and a year before they knew exactly how many bedrooms, everything else that's in there. So my complaint is that you have these $million projects, there's a press release, they know what's in it, they have architects, they have very specific things, they keep the community in the dark, and they only come to the community board right before the general project plan meeting, so that there's not enough time for the community to understand it and do it. I had done a FOIL request on this Kingsborough West project in September of 2021. And for 13 months, they will not give me any bit of information for 13 months, even though they had the winning proposal and they have plans of what's in there. So they are running their game by keeping the community in the dark, and the community board needs to do, I'm not talking about Beverly, because Beverly's been extremely helpful, the only one who's been helpful to me, the chair here. But the community board needs to, as soon as there's a winning proposal, they need to post the RFP, and they need to do a FOIL request, and they need to say what's in the proposal so that the community knows and not to have people caught off guard to say, oh, you know, I didn't realize what was in this. And there was a person from the community on Sterling Street, a professor, who said my community was never notified. And that's what they did in Clarkson. And they're going to do it again on Kingsborough West. They're going to come here with minimal time. And people should ask, if you were the winning proposal a year ago, how come you didn't give us the information that's and you come to us a month before you're going to then have the general project plan, and there's not enough time to object or to give input. So notification of the winning proposal should be right away, even though there's changes. There's enough in it because that's how they had the winning proposal. There's enough information they should tell the community and not keep them in the dark. And it's it's nothing to do with you, Assembly Member Cunningham, but that's how they run.
I totally understand,
Yeah.
and you're absolutely right. I think, you know, again, part of the challenge I think we're having is that we're a part-time legislator at the time. So from January to June, the administration's very responsive, and after June, it's mostly July to December, very community focused. We don't get a lot of response from the second floor, but I will be very forceful on this moving forward. I do have a full session ahead of me, and I look forward to advocating and making sure that we have better communication. So thank you for that.
Being on the housing committee, Assembly Member, is that something that you are able to influence?
Yes, being on the housing committee, obviously being on the housing committee gives me a lot more insight and purview a lot quicker. Because again,
Okay.
if you're not in the committee, you get the information after it's already the
Right.
sausage packaged. So I think that is going to be a very helpful step for us as an office. And now,
Okay.
I was saying that's very helpful. But I think it's been very helpful for us as our office just to be armed with that information. So the two committees I'm trying to get on, just full disclosure, is housing and health. Those are the two committees I'd like to sit on. And I'll have to shift two other committees off my assignment rotation. But I think it's a big, those are two big issues in our community that need some oversight. We already have the education chair in Rita, so we don't need me to cover that area, but I'll be pushing towards that. I should hear something by December 7th, and I will let you guys know. I'll keep you posted.
Okay, thank you. So right now, we're gonna wrap it up. Thank you again for your patience and your flexibility in allowing us to ask all the questions, and you'll give us a very extensive answer. Thank you so much. We're going to let you go, give you time to relax, and we hope you have a good rest of your night.
Thank you so much for your question. Thanks for your engagement. Looking forward to serving you for the next 2 years. And obviously I work for you, so whenever you call me, I will be in front of you.
Thank you, Assembly Member.
Thank you, Assembly Member.
So committee, I hope this meeting was very informative for you. And I hope that any questions that weren't answered, you're willing to write them down and move them forward, because the Assembly Member gave you his email address. So that means you now have access. Utilize the access. I am not in the 43rd, I am in the 57th, but I am on the community board. So we can still work together as a partner, and we still all have access to Assembly Member Cunningham. And we should use that. I mean, like Nicholas was talking about earlier, having problems, when you come up against a developer, and these are the facts, when you're coming up against a developer, the developer views us like little bugs to swat. That's how they view us. But when we come to them as a group, we are individuals, we are a group to be reckoned with, and then they try to avoid us. And that's how we should always approach large entities, as a group, not as an individual. You are a lot less likely to be successful. And that's a fact. So does anyone have any questions before we go? First of all, I want to thank everyone for coming, taking the time out. This is not our usual housing meeting, but we thought it was important to meet the Assembly Member on his schedule, since he wasn't able to meet us on the housing meeting schedule. But does anyone have any questions? Yes, Nicholas.
I have one last suggestion. I don't
Yes.
put any chance to put together a workshop to deal with that particular topic, what to do when a developer is building next to your house. If possible,
So we can get a workshop about what, Nicholas?
can the housing committee reach out to NHS to see if they could do that and present it to the committee and to the general board?
You're saying that to get a workshop regarding when a developer is building next to your house,
Okay,
right?
okay.
Yeah, what the pros and the cons and exactly what to do or where to go.
Right.
We're having issues.
Yes.
So we'll reach out to the community board to identify the agency and that could be a part of a housing meeting. So we'll reach out to the community board and I myself would do some research to see who would be the essential guest at this particular presentation. Would it be DOB? Who else is it? You know what I mean? Because sometimes having one party there and not having the party that they work with not being present, we need them both. Because
And
when we call
exactly.
311, it's like a cascade of events.
Right, and also Nicholas, I know a house not on the other block, they had built a building, a high rise. And I think it may be 8 floors and it's right next to 2 little homes. And the homeowners, because of the foundation may have been issues that they may incur with the building. It turned out that once they approached the developers were paying them a certain amount should in case anything happen to their the structure or where next to, because it was so close, they were getting if they wanted a lump sum or a monthly amount to ensure that any damage to their building, they would be compensated. So it's something that, I think maybe we could research. I know that, 2 homeowners were compensated for that.
The important part about that too is when you go into that kind of agreement, make sure you have a lawyer present, because when a foundation, let's just take that for an example, when the developer is done, your foundation could appear to be fine. Your whole structure of your home could appear to be fine, but there's a little crack that expands over time. So that's why it's best to get into that kind of agreement with a lawyer present that's advocating on your behalf.
Right.
Because even though they're paying you a lump sum of money, it's like being in a car accident when you're hit from the back. When you leave the accident, you're like, oh, I'm fine, I'm good. Don't worry about that. Here's my license box. But then you wake up the next day, your back is killing you. You can't move your neck. And now this whole cascade of events of medical bills and on and on and on. So that is one of the things that even though you feel that I can handle this, have a lawyer present, because lawyers are professionals in anticipating possible disasters.
Yeah.
So make sure, and make sure that you have someone there who's an expert in that, because developers they'll come to you like they're not, but they are. This is not their first rodeo, and they will attempt to, because their goal is to make as much money as possible and to spend as little as possible. And you're on the end of spending as little as possible. So make sure that you protect your asset, which is what your home is, or anyone else in this room who knows someone in that situation on Sullivan Place, that where you see all of these apartment buildings went up, some of them were right next to a private home. And one of the homeowners came to the community board. It was a living nightmare. They're walking across their roof and all kinds of stuff. So you need a lawyer to make sure your rights aren't being violated, to protect your assets. It's just beneficial in the long run. Okay. So does anyone else have any additional questions? And that's a good idea. We are going to pin that, Nicholas, and we're going to see what parties need to be present at something like that, because you're not the first homeowner, and I'm sure you're not going to be the last by the time all this is over, to have to go through such a thing.
That's correct.
Teresa, you have your hand up. Did you just forget to put it down, Teresa?
Yeah, sorry, I just forgot to put it down.
It's
We
okay. That
are
happens.
having, just to add, there is a lot of problems on Sullivan Place on the side of the street where the demolitions and buildings are happening. It's quite bad for some people, and they haven't, they're supposed to put in these, I think it's called a seismometer, the developers are, when they're
Oh,
building
okay.
to you, and that wasn't done. You know, they had to, that group of buildings behind that hotel that's going up on Empire, you know, the Sullivan Street houses,
Yes, I know you're talking about.
they're having quite a lot of problems. You know,
So, if you know them, Teresa, ask them to come to the housing committee on the community board so we can find out. First of all, we can support them. That's number one. We can support them with resources. We can support them with access. Because most of us on the housing committee, we have housing information, not just from a rental perspective, but from a homeowner's perspective. Remember, that's what housing is. It's about housing in Community Board 9, not just rentals, not just home ownership. It's all of that that comes together. Sublets, SROs, all of that. So if you know these people, Teresa, ask them to come to the housing committee and express what their concerns are and some of the challenges that they're facing, so we can attempt to enable them to access resources and we can support them. Okay?
Yeah, there's that group of people that some of them, you know, they don't have internet. You know, one would call on the phone, I believe.
Okay, so they can call on the phone.
Yeah,
the webinar has a phone option.
And then the people at One Sullivan who are getting their apartment totally covered by that other building. That's another sad case of housing, you know, losing all your life.
Sullivan in Washington?
Yes, that's,
Yeah,
I know
exactly.
somebody who lives there, and it's a fairly sad situation.
It is. The back end has no window because they built the apartment right next to the window.
Yeah, all the light
Right.
in their apartment is gone now. Their children, you know, it's so noisy day in and day out.
But there are rights they have with that. And because I was asking someone else about that situation, because I saw a building in Queens over by the Queensboro Bridge. They built a building like that, a lot bigger than that one, by the way, but they did it just like they did this one. They built the buildings so close to each other that you could stand on the balcony of one and toss a ball on the balcony of the other one and not miss it. That's how close they were. But there's still rights, I understand, from for the tenants who are being ignored. So if you know someone, ask them to come to the housing committee, and so we can help them access resources and even their rights in the process. Okay.
All right.
Okay. Because that's what we're here for. Community Board 9, elected officials are a resource. 311 is a resource, but your community board is a resource as well. So it's something that all of us need to remember. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, Teresa. If there are no other questions or concerns, are there?
I don't know how to put my hand down.
Once again, thank you everyone for showing up. Thank you all for participating, and have a good night.
Thank you. Good night.
You're welcome. Good night, everyone.
Good night.